Welcome. Today's video is about laws of indices, and we're going to discuss first the notation. So a to the power of n. A is known as a base and n is known as an index. Okay, so what does it actually mean? Well, a to the n is just n numbers of a times together. So we have a times a times a times many more a's. Okay, and there is n number of them, and we would write that as a to the power of n. It is very important to remember the difference between plus and multiple when you have the same number. So for example, we have 5 a's. If we put plus a plus a plus a plus a, so there is 5 a's, the plus means that you will put the number of a's in front of a, so it's 5a. If, however, we do the same thing but we put a multiple sign, so we have again 5 a's, and then I'm gonna put a multiple sign between them, that will add the number of a's into the index part. So it will become a to the power of 5. Let's now look at some of the laws. So the first law is a to the power of m times a to the power of n. And all you need to do is just add the power. So it will be a to the power of m plus n. For example, let's look at a to the power of 3 times a to the power of 2. So what is that if we expand it? It will be the same as if you wrote 3 a's times together in one bracket times the second bracket where you have 2 a's. And when you multiply, it doesn't matter which order you go in, so we will just get rid of the brackets as it doesn't matter. And you can count how many a's there are, so there is 5 a's. And that is just a to the power of 3 plus 2, and that equals to a to the power of 5. Again, so when you times it, you add the powers. The next rule is when you have a to the power of m and you divide by a to the power of n. You can also find it in the form of a fraction, so a to the power of m over a to the power of n, which is exactly the same thing. And that becomes a to the power of n minus m. So when you divide, or if you have a fraction, what you need to do to your powers is you need to subtract them. For example, we're going to have a to the power of 3 divided by a to the power of 2. And I'm gonna write it as a fraction and also split into how many a's we have. So on the top we're gonna have 3 a's multiplied together and 2 a's at the bottom. As you can see, you can cancel out the same number, so a divided by a becomes 1, and that you can do twice. So your fraction becomes just a times 1 1 and divided by 1 times 1, which will become a over 1, which is the same as a. Next rule we have is a to the power of m, and we put it to the power of n. Okay, so it seems quite a tricky one, but all you need to do is times our power. The example we have is a to the power of 2, and it will be put to the power of 3 now. So if I write it as a separate bracket, so you have a times a, and then that's your first bracket, and it was to the power of 3, so you just repeat it 3 times. Okay, just the same as before. If you get rid of all your brackets and just count how many a's you have, we will have a to the power of 6, which is the same as a to the power of 2 times 3. Okay, next rule, and that is a times b to the power of n. This is not really a rule, it's just so you know when you expand brackets, but it becomes a to the power of n and b to the power of n. For example, if we have 3x in brackets and it's all squared together, and that is, for example, 3x times 3x again, because it was squared. And if you get rid of the brackets again and put the numbers together first, so 3 times 3, and then you're gonna have x times x, and then you work it out, so 3 times 3 becomes 9, and x times x becomes x squared. Next rule is a to the power of minus n. So in indices, it's really important to remember you can never get a negative number unless you started with a negative number. So unless a is negative, you'll never have a negative number. So negative power just makes it 1 over a to the power of n. Okay, you need to also remember that if you have a fraction to the negative power, so what happens is it's the same thing. You do 1 over that fraction, a over b, and it becomes the power of n. But when you divide 1 by fraction, all you need to do is just flip that fraction upside down. So it becomes b over a, and it is to the power of n. This is not a rule, this is just application of other rules. But I know a lot of my students struggle with understanding that, so I'll write it here. Okay, and our example will be a to the power of minus 1. Very common, and that becomes just 1 over a to the 1, and that is just 1 over a. Next rule is a to the power of 1 over n. So what does a fraction do? Well, the fraction is just a root of a. Okay, in our case it's n root of a. For example, if we have a to the power of half, that will become a square root of a. Next one is also not really a rule, it's just a combination of previous rules. So if we have a to the power of a fraction, but you have a numerator and denominator, what you do is you just split it into 2 powers. So you have a to the power of 1 over n, and then outside of the bracket we're gonna put m, just like the rule I just pointed out. Okay, and that becomes, well, the bracket is just nth root of a, and the outside bracket we keep the same to the power of m. And the final rule we're gonna look at is a to the power of 0 is 1. That is true for all a. And example of previous one, where you just look at the actual number, so we have 9 to the power of 3 over 2. Okay, that is 9, not a g. A lot of people find my 9 confusing, sorry. So it will be a square root of 9, and it will be all to the power of 3. Again, it's 9, not a g. So the square root of 9 is 3, and 3 cubed is 27. Okay, an example of final one, it doesn't matter how big a is or how small it is. If it's to the power of 0, it will always equal to 1. So we have 1 million to the power of 0 is 1, and if we have negative number as well, so I'm gonna write minus 1000, and it's to the power of 0, and it still equals 1. Now we went through all the rules, and there is few numbers that you should remember. So you have 2 squared, 2 cubed, and I'm gonna go all the way to 5. This is something that you should remember yourself. Just memorize it, because this is the most common numbers that appear in the questions. They will either ask you to square root it, cube root it, or cube it. So it's good to practice them and just memorize them, so you know. It doesn't usually go past 5. It's very uncommon. And here is your answers. Please remember them, and if you have any more questions, let us know, and there will be next video with some practice questions. Thank you.